world has changed. You may not like the fact that the world has changed. You may not be comfortable with the fact the world has changed. You may rail against the fact that the world has changed and get annoyed. But the one thing you cannot avoid is the fact that the world has changed. And as a person who leads a business, what that means for you as a leader is that the way you design and build and lead your business has to change. And so what we're going to be talking about today is some of the things that come in from an e-commerce and a banking perspective into this digital reality. Why is it a mobile first world? What is the difference between digital and analog and just digitising, putting a digital layer on top of the way that you've always done things, and why that's not necessarily a good thing and the right way of going about it. Now, we have all had conversations over the last number of years about the fourth industrial revolution, trying to get our heads around what does this thing mean. And then 2 years ago, along came COVID. And when COVID came, it kind of directed all of our focus off these things that were so important before. And we spent the last 2 years almost defocused and misdirected on all of the stuff that COVID did to our lives. Now, from a digital perspective, COVID fast-tracked certain things like video conferencing, working from home, but probably for the purposes of our conversation today, what it really did most significantly was it misdirected us from the really important stuff of understanding what is the fourth industrial revolution all about, and from a commercial and business perspective, how is it changing the way that we live and do business? The fourth industrial revolution is not a simple topic. As you can see, it's got more and more complex over time. It was a term that was coined in 2015 by a guy called Carl Schwab at the World Economic Forum. And it just started from, wow, we're in a new world, in a new space. The fourth industrial revolution, where we're talking about cyber physical systems as opposed to electronic and computer systems. But as we've engaged with this over the last 6 or 7 years, it's got more and more complex. And we have to understand what this means for us as organizations and as leaders. A guy called Michael Mace wrote a blog, and in the blog he spoke about why this is so important for us to change. He looked at Nokia and BlackBerry and said they were playing a perfectly strategic game of ice hockey. They were skating to where the puck was going to be, not where it was. They were doing everything right. But in the process, what they didn't realize was that Apple and Google were coming along and not just changing the rules of the game, they were melting the ice rink and changing the game itself. And in the article, he coined the term the Wile E. Coyote effect. I don't know about you, but Roadrunner cartoons were a big part of my childhood, and every cartoon pretty much went the same way. Wile E. Coyote tries a whole lot of nefarious schemes to capture Roadrunner. Roadrunner gets past, and every cartoon ended the same way. Roadrunner ran to the edge of a cliff, hit brakes, and Wile E. Coyote ran past and carried on running. Looked over his shoulder, realized Roadrunner's there, looked under his feet, realized he had no ground, and then he fell and poof. Every cartoon ended the same way. Now here's the thing. When the minute Wile E. Coyote stepped off of that cliff, the next part of his journey was the bottom of that canyon. He just didn't realize it yet. And that's the Wile E. Coyote effect. He carried on doing the stuff he had always done while the world around him had changed. That's where we're at as organizations today, as we now get on the other side of this distraction of COVID. We're back to saying, what is it to be successful in a digital world of work? And what is it, how do we make money in that space? How do we build commerce and banking relationships that enable that? Every single one of us know what we need to be successful in the analog world of work, in that old world of work. And essentially, we just carry on doing the stuff we've always done, and we'll be successful moving forward. But now organizations all around the world are hearing about digital, fourth industrial revolution, all of these things. And they're putting together teams and committees and getting groups saying, how do we digitize? And essentially what most organizations are doing is they're creating an app or a website or some sort of digital veneer that sits on top of their analog world of work. They're basically saying, how do we just put a digital point of entry into the way we've always done things and not fundamentally change anything? And we just say, how can digital help us do the things we've always done simpler, cheaper, and faster? But the reality is that digital is a whole new way of doing work. And if we just digitize those things, we're going to get to a point sometime in the near future where we're going to have to redo and undo all of the stuff that we've done. We need to ask ourselves today, how do we move from the analog world of work, the world that was, into the digital world of work, the world that is where our future lies? And so there are a couple of things that come into this, particularly as we're thinking about it from a commercial perspective of how do we build businesses that make money in this space. And the first thing to do is to realize that this world is a mobile-first world. It's all driven by this little device that we carry in our pockets. To give an example of how mobile has changed everything, in the 1980s and the 1990s, in fact, through human history, if we went to the best, most amazing library that ever existed, we could access the information on a topic that that library had books for. But in your pockets today, if you've got a smartphone, no matter what your smartphone is, even if you've got one of those old Blackberries, the reality is you can pull out your phone and you can access all of the publicly available information on any topic at the push of a button. Far more information than you could get from the best library that ever existed in history. Not only that, you don't have to walk up and down stacks carrying piles and piles of books to flip through pages to find the one line of information. It's all done for you instantaneously on this device in your hand. And just even here, as I'm speaking to you today, my mobile phone is a big part of what's connecting me to my content that I'm then presenting through to you. So everything in our world, and if you sit down and think about it, so much of your life is mobile first. And mobile is not the only device that's driving our world. We're living in a world of connected things, connected devices. And so this phrase that you hear about the Internet of Things, essentially it's devices talking to devices without human beings in the middle of it. And the very first connected device, the very first Internet of Things thing was a Coke machine. A guy called Dave Nichols was at Carnegie Mellon University in the United States, and he used to get so annoyed because his lab was on the far side of the campus from where the Coke machine was at the canteen. And he would walk across campus to go and get a Coke and often get there and the machine was empty or it had recently been reloaded and the Cokes were warm. And in his annoyance, what he did was he went into the machine and he just put a whole lot of sensors in place that then wrote to a website. And what did this do? He didn't have to tell the Coke guy, hey, when you reload the machine, push this button, do those things. Pretty much as the new Coke cans went in, it just automatically hit the sensors, uploaded to the website, and he, sitting on the other side of the campus, could dial onto the website, have a look and see if there were Cokes available and if they were cold or not. And soon he started to share that URL, that website with friends, and the Internet of Things was created. We're living in a world now where, as we project forward, at the end of 2023, we're anticipating not just one Coke machine connected to the internet. We're talking about a world of 27 billion connected devices. All devices talking to each other without one human being anywhere involved in that process. To give you context, that's 4 devices per living human being on the planet. And every single one of those is talking, and from a business perspective, there is commercial value in each of those interactions and the transactions that they facilitate. And so you're going to start hearing from a banking perspective they're talking about banking as a service. Some banks are talking about open banking, where essentially what banks are doing is they're changing their thinking and saying banking needs to be about us as a platform, creating a space where we can service and support our customers and their markets. And so banks in this, they call it disintermediated, we've moved the human being out of it. In this disintermediated connected devices world, banks are creating spaces where they're going to be giving you a little piece of code that you just put into what you're building, which will enable them to make money for you as all of these things are happening without you even being involved in it. Open banking, banking as a service is the shift that's coming through. Now, as all of these things connect, what are they doing? They're generating data. Lots and lots and lots of information. Data is the oil of the digital world. In fact, I was in a session hosted by a banker a number of years ago, where a data scientist from Wits University used a phrase that has changed my thinking forever. He said, as we're living our lives in this very connected world today, we as human beings are generating data vapor. He said it's like data is steaming off of us. In fact, the average human being generates about 2 gigabytes of data a day just by living. And all of that data, all of that information needs to get pulled into a way that makes sense. And again, banks are stepping on top of this and helping us to make sense of all of the data that is part of our reality. And where we're beginning to access it, you're hearing about the metaverse. Essentially, the metaverse is trying to create a one-stop shop, a one space where our whole digital identity is experienced and integrated in that one area. And in the metaverse, we're starting to see banks, we're starting to see financial services using that open banking thinking to come in and say, how can we facilitate your digital reality and facilitate your ownership of digital products in the metaverse in the same way as we're doing it in the physical world. Now, if you're a leader in an organization, what does this mean for you? It's raising a challenge. Every single one of us know what we need to do in that analog world of work, in this first curve, where we're saying if we do the stuff we've always done, we'll be successful. But now we're hearing about a new curve moving, which is the digital world of work coming through. And the challenge we face is that in the old world of work, there are still some things that are running along and making money for us. And we can't just throw them away. We've got to stick there. And in the new world of work, there are some things that are expensive and clunky and not necessarily delivering the value that we believe it's going to be able to deliver in time, like the metaverse. But as a leader, you're stuck in this dilemma zone. What do I keep in the old world of work because there's still money there? What do I move across into the new world of work where there's risk? And you're navigating this dilemma. You've got this challenge of moving through. And when it comes to your banking and financial services partners, you've had another risk there. If your bank is stuck in the old world of work and you're moving through into the digital world of work, how's your bank going to service you? Or if they're just digitizing, they're essentially all their processes are stuck in the old world of work, they're giving you an app that ends up effectively like a bungee cord between you and the old world, constantly holding you back and restricting your ability to move forward. And so banking and e-commerce will be leading the way that we make that transition from the analog world of work into the digital world of work. But where's our future going? Al Gore, the ex-vice president of the United States, when he left office, went and created a think tank called the Fifth Element Group. And he had got them together and said, guys, so we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution, but let's look a little bit further. What is the fifth industrial revolution going to be about? And why is this conversation today about the fourth industrial revolution in banking and e-commerce important? Because of the number 4. Number 4 means that there are 1, 2, and 3, but also that there's going to be a 5. It's not just about surviving the present. It's about how do we build businesses that will succeed and thrive in the present, that will set us up for future success in the fifth industrial revolution. And as we move forward, what is the fifth industrial revolution? It's this connection of purpose and inclusivity from a human perspective to all the things that technology is trying to enable for us in the fourth industrial revolution. And so, if you're wanting to be successful today, if you're wanting to understand who is the right banking partner, how do we build our supply chain from an e-commerce perspective with the people that we're working with and we're working for, our suppliers and our customers, don't just look at what you need today, stretch your eyes through to your horizon, who do you need to be tomorrow, and then bring that back and make today decisions that will give you some legacy and some success moving into a world where tomorrow is radically different to even today.